All right, good morning and welcome to Cafe IW. This is our educational series for tech and non-tech founders meeting once in person and once virtually every quarter to learn something new that can help their business succeed. My name is Jane Joseph. I am the Digital and Community Engagement Manager here at Innovation Works. We take Southwestern PA's tech companies to the next stage of growth with funding, expertise, and a network of connections to help startups succeed. We are one of the country's most active investors, bridging the gap between initial ideas to future growth, and the only fund to focus exclusively on the Pittsburgh region, with high growth potential for companies in software, hardware, and life sciences. You may already know our accelerator programs as well, Alpha Lab Gear, and Alpha Lab Health. So today we want to talk about low-code, no-code solutions that you can leverage for your company. I'm going to kick it over to our portfolio executive, Jim Wrubel, and he's going to get us started. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning. Thanks, Jane. And welcome to everybody, and thanks to all of you on the panel for participating. It's a topic that I really enjoy myself. Even as a software developer, I find myself turning to some of these tools. And I'm sure those of you in the audience have probably at least heard low code, no code. Maybe some of you have experimented as well or using them. So we've got a great group of panelists here that are going to tell you their stories and hopefully give you some inspiration to see how you can use these for your own businesses. So I want to quickly let the panelists introduce themselves. Melinda, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Melinda. I am the CEO and co-founder at Parcel Health. Parcel Health, we develop sustainable medication packaging. So if you think of your orange pill bottles, we're a replacement for the orange pill bottles you get from pharmacies. We are a manufacturing-based company. We're B2B, but our end users are consumers. So we're not a software company, which is where a lot of this low-code, no-code stuff comes in for us.
So Yaovi, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Yaovi, the founder and CEO of Roadies. Roadies is an art investing platform for those who share passion for art and the artist story, and those who share the intrinsic value of art as an investment asset. Our goal is to make art an investable asset for everybody and make it inclusive for all.
All right, Lauren, you're up.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm Lauren Golembiewski. I'm Chief Product Officer at Chaos Reactor, and I'm on a mission to make generative AI more accessible and usable for everyone. And Chaos Reactor is a no-code tool that helps everyone harness the power of generative AI. My background is in UX and product design, so I feel like I've spent my entire career in a no-code environment. So I'm really excited to talk about how I've used it as a designer as well as a founder.
Cool, thanks. All right, let's get right to it. One of the things that I always appreciate, especially when I'm dealing with other founders and early stage companies, you learn so much just from people telling their stories. So that's where I like to start here. So I'm going to ask all of you to just tell your stories. How are you leveraging low and no code solutions? Lauren, you've got a ton of experience in this space, so let's start with you. How are you using these tools?
Yeah, I'll kind of start on the furthest end of the continuum to like no code. And I consider like all of the design work I do in Figma and prototyping there like truly no code, because I'm just working with like boxes on a screen. I'm drawing the interface and I'm not actually creating something with logic. And then I have used everything from spreadsheets to like database tools like Airtable, which I think go like a little bit further up into like the low code environment where you're, maybe creating formulas. That's code. So everyone out there in Excel, you're already writing code. And then into Webflow. I actually started with Webflow when it first launched in like 2011. It was first built as like a web design tool. It wasn't really great at doing that, so I couldn't replace the Creative Suite at the time. And this was before like Sketch or Figma existed. So, and then I came back to Webflow after we started our company, and it became our solution for our website, and then was forever like the place that we would recommend as a website and CMS content management system for hosting like a blog or e-commerce. And I was the main user and administrator and like builder on Webflow. And I consider Webflow pretty like low code because it is still within HTML, CSS framework, but it makes it a lot more approachable and visual, which I'm a very visual person. So I gravitate towards tools like that. And then I really think I up-leveled to my no-code game closer to the code, the full code environment when I started working with like automation platforms, Zapier first, and then graduated up to Make, which used to be called Integromat. And it gives you a lot of like real calculation, code kind of functions that you can apply to like databases. It's lets you do a lot of things simultaneously with an automation. And that had a pretty steep learning curve. But once I kind of got into that, I could start building like whole almost apps. And one of them is like a webinar solution. So we're all on a webinar and we might not realize how difficult it is to create a webinar, have your registrants go to like your email system, communicate all the things you need to around the webinar, and then make sure that you can continue to like talk to those people. There's not like really a great solution. Zoom is one piece of it. So I built like an app that took our webinar registrations and sent them to HubSpot, sent them to the Zoom registration, and made it like the data clean across all of the areas that needed to be. So like that was really where I started to see like the power, not having to go to a developer in our organization and distract them away from building our core product, and instead could get it done myself. So that's really what I love. And as a designer, you don't get that satisfaction a lot. Oftentimes you're sending the things you create off to be implemented by someone else. So I really love that power that it gave me.
Cool, thanks. And Yaovi, when I heard the story of you launching Roadies, I was just really impressed with how you leverage Webflow specifically. And for those of you in the panel, like or the audience, if you haven't already figured that out, you're going to hear the word Webflow a lot. So, but Yaovi, I'd love for you to just kind of tell the story of your launching and how you got yourself to a finished product and out on the market.
Yeah, no. When we initially started out, especially when you're Web3, a lot of the focus is around write a smart contract and you have a product, right? So a lot of the advice we're getting is like, oh, just write a smart contract and that'll be a product, and just put it out there. But the thing is, you need to have an interface for the consumers to interact with your smart contract. So we were trying to really test out the market and try to put something out as fast as we can. And we didn't want to write too much code because we already spent too much time writing our smart contract, to create our tokens. So I just go with Webflow. I had no idea, how to use it when I first began. So the first few tries were very, I must give up and say, let's just jump into React and use whatever templates we can find out there and just build it with React. So we spent about a week just kind of designing in Figma to really figure out like, okay, how can we lay it out? Can we do this with Webflow? And I spent about a few hours going through Webflow's, Webflow 101, which kind of directs you on how to basically use Webflow. Everything, they give you everything. And the best thing about it is not just no code, it's low code in a way to where, if you can program, there's some components that you can just program that yourself. So we went ahead and just went through that training and kind of started building out our website piece by piece and connecting our smart contract. And one of the best things is for us, we want to also accept payments on our platform, right? So we tap into Stripe, and Stripe makes it so easy to integrate into basically any interfaces. If you can't code, you can just grab a payment link and insert it onto your your platform. So we went through, built our website with Webflow and tested it out, and it felt so native. It felt like someone just programmed this whole thing within the last few months, and we were able to see the user interface, everything was just pretty, right? So we went ahead and tested it out, and everything went smoothly. And more than what we imagined, right? The website, it flowed the way we wanted to flow, and all of that was done, just using no-code tools. And of course, we integrated some CSS ourselves to make things more acceptable to what we wanted to look like. But at the end of the day, Webflow, it saved us from, kind of basically shutting down the whole Roadies idea into what it is today.
No, that's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that you mentioned there, CSS and the difference between low code and no code that I want to get into a little bit later. But I want to turn to Melinda, and I'm so glad that you're on this panel, because I think when people hear low code, no code, they sort of focus on the word code and they're like, oh, well, those are like software things. But you've got a great perspective as not a software company. So I really want to give you a chance to just share how you're using some of these tools at Parcel Health.
Yeah, we use a lot of these tools to get by. I mean, our team is really small. We don't have coders on our team, there's not a lot of us with extra bandwidth to do a lot of this stuff that can be automated. So some of the software we used, one of the earliest one is definitely Zapier. So at the time we had a pilot program, and so there was a workflow in my mind because I was doing all this manually. So basically a pharmacy reaches out to us on our website because it's a short form. And then when I received that short form, I would reply, be like, oh, thank you so much for your interest, and then attach our program information with all the rules and regulations. And then the person reads it, then the person has to fill out a form. And then when they fill out the form and sign, that they agree to it, then we'll send them another email. So this was another email to onboard them and to tell them what to expect. So this was like the 6-step thing, right? There was this back and forth. We were doing it all manually, and it was just not sustainable because pharmacies were bound to be falling through the cracks, especially how much interest we were getting in June. So we used Zapier. I don't even know how I found it. I know it's very popular. I was not familiar with it. So I found it, and then we just started building the workflow for it, right? Like just the same way that I had just described it, in Zapier, you can be like, when this happens, then do this, right? Everyone talks about logic. So exactly when someone fills out this form on our website, send this email. And so then it was automating the whole entire process for us. We basically built it out all the way to the point where the only time we need to do any email is to if the pharmacy had questions for us. Otherwise, everything was just automated. It will populate on this other software that we were using to track, did they get their first shipment? Did they get their second shipment? So that's how we use Zapier. And then more recently, this other automation thing, it's a CRM tool. It's called HubSpot. It's very popular. So I feel like most people on the call have already used it. For both the Zapier and HubSpot, we use the free version. And so these are things that, for me, cost savings is a huge factor. And so for HubSpot, we use it to track all our customer relationship, And the one tool I really, really like is the plugin that you can install on Chrome. And so then if you're sending emails back and forth with a prospective customer, it will track the entire email thread. And what's helpful with this is me and my co-founder have that Chrome installed. So if I ever had a question about what was going on, I can go in there and see the entire email thread, what was happening, and then touch base if you need to, or answer the question quickly. Instead of needing to go back to my co-founder and be like, hey, what happened? And then she has to look through her email threads. So I really love that Chrome plugin function specifically for HubSpot, just because it tracks everything. Those are the two tools that has been really helpful to us. There's some that are just not helpful. I'm sure, Jim, you're going to ask about what tools did we use and decide to abandon. Plenty. And so, that's what we do. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. And obviously a great segue, because that's, one of the things that comes up is well, there's a whole bunch of them out there. And they do some really cool things, but then sometimes maybe not. So, you mentioned, finding tools that weren't a good fit, tell me about that. And how do you know if they're not a good fit and you should move on?
Yeah, I think a really simple way to tell if it's not working is if nobody else on your team is using it. So my team is primarily me and my co-founder, but we have contractors and part-timers in our team. And so, so I get very excited about these tools because I always think that they're going to change the way we do things, and then I will like start it. But then like, if I see nobody's interacting with that tool, if they're not really using it, it's not really helping them, then we just kind of sunset it and move on. It's really no use like trying to push people to change their, like to start a whole new process if they didn't find that it was useful. So yeah, one of it was ClickUp. So we bought a subscription to ClickUp. I thought it was going to be amazing, right? Because there's all this task management in there that you can like assign to people and then it is way too complicated for what we needed it to be. And then it was not sending emails right to notify people. And so nobody was using that platform other than me, even though I was like assigning people to things. So I was like, okay, this is not working for the team. It's not helping us. So then we just kind of moved on from it.
Yeah, cool. Lauren, I know you've got a broad set of experience with these tools. So, when do you find out that like this wasn't a good fit?
Yeah, I love that Melinda's example of talking about like their journey of taking a manual process to something that is in a tool. And I often think that people who like when we skip that process and we go directly to a tool, that's often when we're making the wrong choice. Like we haven't outlined the manual process first. And you think, I mean, I know I get stuck in this kind of like mental trap. You think the tool's going to save you in some way. Like you think that it's going to help you magically create a process. And if you haven't created that process or outlined it, and gotten the people involved that need to be involved, then it often just like is something that falls flat. It's really funny that she mentioned ClickUp too, because ClickUp's one of the things that we used that really helped transform our team's process. So I think it's really about understanding your team dynamics, like your products and tools, and having that set first. At least for us, that's really like, and I'm a designer, so like that's my process anyway. I kind of like to document everything first and then go find the solution or hunt for it. But as far as tools for us, like I said, like Zapier, we grew out of a little bit because we were trying to chain a lot of different automations together and have them kind of like route between different things. Like if someone was already in our HubSpot CRM, then we needed to send them a different email. So we actually needed like a functionality that went and like searched our HubSpot database and then returned like they're already in there or they've already attended this webinar or something like that to then send them the appropriate email. And I'm sure there's like more Zapier evolution since last time I logged in, but at the time it wasn't really like serving our purpose. So we that's when we like investigated and actually invested the time in learning Integromat at the time, and then that had a name change to Make. And so I think it's also like I think generally like don't be afraid to like search out other options, or when you get to the point where you might be outgrowing something, there could be more complex solutions out there. And I think it's about understanding when you have just reached like the time you're spending on the tool not serving you, like all the manual work you're trying to do in between to make those automations work. If that gets overwhelming, you're kind of in that same spot where you're like, okay, I have to rethink this process and rethink the whole chain of events. Like I said, Webflow wasn't right for us initially because we went into it with the wrong conceptual understanding. And all the other project management apps that we tried before we got to ClickUp, like Asana and Jira, actually ClickUp in its flexibility and kind of like hyper customizing was something that we really wanted for our team. And I think because we had a lot of like our CTO was also really invested in setting up a lot of the automations and getting that started. So we had someone to spearhead that within our organization who then actually like trained the team on it. And we had like a lot of calls that were just like, here's how to use this, and we document everything. So we have like documents in our ClickUp that are like, here's how we're actually using it, and here's what's set up in the automation, which I think is a really important thing for like scaling a team and a company that's built on low or no code.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point there. That we just heard that, the same tool can be the right fit for one company and not a good fit for other companies. So it's one of those things where you have to experiment. And obviously, for those of you, obviously in the panel, but also anyone on call who are startup founders, that, the experimentation, try, learn, repeat, right? That's such a big part of it. And Yaovi, I don't know if you've come across tools in your startup journey that you felt like weren't a fit, and how do you know like when something's working or not?
Yeah, I mean, when before we even went with Webflow, we tried other no code tools, right? I think one of them was Weebly. There's a lot of web builder out there that proclaim to be no code. But as soon as we started designing with them, we figured a lot of them, they didn't have what we wanted to do, right? And they didn't have a lot of supporting documents for us to kind of go through and say, okay, we can do this here. But one of the tools that we actually started using and figured out, okay, this probably isn't a fit, was Zapier as well. So we set it up to, kind of, first initial, draft to, send customers an update on what just happened and how we communicate with them. But a lot of those were not being recorded where we wanted to, and we really didn't need to automate it because we had such a small number of customers, right, to the point where we can just reach out to them where we needed to. So, and when we set up this automation tool, it kept on sending messages to our customers when we didn't want it to, and that's probably because the learning curve there that we didn't properly set it up as well. But it really wasn't doing what we wanted to do for us, and we also set it up to kind of create different to connect with our Jira, right? So anytime we put something new in our Slack that needs to be a work item, this app will just take it, create it, and put it into our Jira. So that way we don't have to manually go through and set those up one by one. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a fit for us mainly because it didn't do what we wanted to do. We had to go back and do a lot of cleanup from scratch ourselves again, right? And that time that taken from us, we want to automate it, but the time it was taken for us, just all of that wasn't feasible at all. So we ended up just moving away from that. And we still use Jira and have a better way of communicating with our customers, have a better mailing list now that we directly just every interaction with a new customer is automatically going on that menu because we have better processes set up in place. And some of them are low code, in my opinion, because it was just a one-time thing, and we copied the code that was given to us from that vendor and then put it on our platform, and everything just flows smoothly.
Cool, thanks. I know, I think one of the reasons why low and no code solutions have risen in popularity is there's just a scarcity of developer talent, right? You would want in your ideal case, you find a developer who can implement some of these things for you. And these tools let you skip that process, and you can interact with the tool and get roughly the same experience that you would if you had a team going out there, which is very cool and very powerful. But also, it's DIY, which means if you're stuck, it's also do it yourself, try to get yourself unstuck. So the next question I have was, for this panel is like, if you get stuck, how do you get help for these tools? And Yaovi, I know you've gone through some of the like Webflow University and stuff. So if you want to talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, definitely. So I definitely did get stuck because I was new to Webflow, like I mentioned, right? And so I went through their Webflow 101, which is you spend about an hour going over it, but it doesn't tell you all the answers that you're looking for, right? So what I ended up doing is I Googled something, say, oh, how do I do this in Webflow? And Webflow is so good with their SEO, right? So anything that I'm looking up, the first result that pops up, it goes to their website, which is the Webflow University, right? And just walk you through the step-by-steps on how to do it. And we also wanted to be fast enough, right? I didn't want to spend under 30 days kind of building it. So what I started doing was get involved in the Webflow community as well, because there's so many Webflow, what I call gurus out there, right? They know how to do some of these things within a split second. So whenever I got stuck, and I said, okay, I spent more than 2 hours on this. I need somebody else that knows this more than me to come in. So I met somebody who knew Webflow very well, and I told them, just show me how to do it, and I'll take care of the rest. And they were willing enough. Most of the stuff that I got stuck with, they'll come in within an hour, they're like, oh, here's how you do it. Here's why it's not working for you right now because you had this place in the wrong place. And just like that, I was helping other people in the community as well. Like, oh, here's some templates that I made for other projects. And one of the most important thing that when you're building with no code is always look at the community, see what other people have done something similar to yours, right? So we are building a Web3 platform, and I started looking at all the other templates that they have there for Web3 related projects, and one of them stood out because they built a whole website and Webflow to where it even connects to your Web3 wallet, right in the Webflow. And I was like, I didn't even know we could do that. So I went through and saw their templates and started going through like see what they did. So the cool thing about Webflow is, every single thing on the website, it creates a flow for us, so you know exactly how each of those are working, right? So I just go through those, kind of study them, like, okay, I can do this. Oh, this will take me this amount of hours to do it. So maybe it's not something that I need to implement right away, but let me implement something similar that worked for me. But leverage, the community, because a lot of these platforms, they have communities of people that are already building those spaces. So leverage that and leverage, the documentation. You might not want to read it, but a lot of time, they're all visual based, so you can just scroll through and see how they do it. And with 2-minute video, you understand exactly what you do to get yourself on stuff.
Cool. And Lauren, I know you've gone through a ton of tools and have a ton of experience. So, when you get stuck, where do you turn?
Yeah, I mean, first place is always Google. And I think like a lot of times you have to put yourself in the mindset of a developer, because now like you're the developer, you're working with no code tools, but you're still thinking through the technicalities and the logic. So it's still a very highly technical endeavor a lot of the times. And you just got to be good at Googling a lot of it. Like there's communities out there. There's Stack Exchange for a lot of these tools and platforms, or Stack Overflow, not Stack Exchange. Sorry. There's like a lot of forums outside of even the documentation, the core documentation of those websites. Like Webflow has Webflow University. In like all of these tools have great documentation. And then sometimes I think it's like, like finding other YouTubers or creators who are showing their process, and they can often like open your eyes to what is possible, and then give you ideas about what you can go do or figure out how to do. And I have the benefit, like I should mention that I am married to a software engineer. So ultimately I can actually go and be like, hey, I'm having a lot of trouble with this. Can you help me think through this automation or this particular thing? Like, is it even possible what I'm trying to do? Because sometimes you don't understand like the limitations of the system you're within because you don't have some of that technical knowledge. So if you have someone who can provide that technical knowledge, the communities out there are a lot of very generous technical people who are willing to just look at something and be like, oh yeah, this is not gonna work. I would maybe look at a different solution. But it's hard. Sometimes you're kind of mired in this area of like, I feel like I can figure this out, but I'm not finding anything. And definitely reach out for help and build a network of people who also are kind of in the same area. So like if you're a startup founder, talking to other startup founders, because almost every startup founder is probably looking at a no-code tool or using it at some point in their journey. We did this when we went through Techstars. We were introducing everyone to like what we were doing in ClickUp, and gave like a bunch of trainings and like help to people who wanted to get onto ClickUp. I feel like ClickUp should have paid us some money for the evangelism we were doing, but we just liked it so much, and we're talking about how it was helping us, that other people were like, oh, can you show us how you're doing that? And then once we did that, we got to see what other people built by the end of the program. And then they were telling us new things and showing us new things that they were doing. So I think like if you give to the community, you'll kind of get things back when you need it, or maybe when you don't need it, but you're still pleasantly surprised.
That's it's awesome. That's kind of what I find too, is that each support is now a peer network instead of like an Oracle type thing. Like you get help from other people who've tried and run through some of the same challenges. And Melinda, I don't know if you've run into cases where you've been stuck and have stories about getting unstuck.
Yeah, I think Yaovi and Lauren both covered it all, Googling, asking for help. I think that's exactly what we did. The only advice I have is just like be patient. I know it can get very frustrating, especially if you're not a coder. When we first started Zapier, it just seriously would not attach to the document we wanted to attach. It drove me nuts. But when you're building it, you're just like, oh, it's so much easier for me to just do this manually. And then you like think about it, you're like, okay, but like that's not like feasible. So then you're like, okay, go back to trying to build it. So I would just impart patience and ask for help. Yeah.
Thanks. Got a question already from the participants. Thanks, David. Are there any tools that you're aware of and haven't had a chance to use, but think like, wow, that looks really cool, and I want to find a way to work that into my flow? Yeah. Jump ball for anyone here.
For me, I kind of started using it, but recently, but Copy AI is one of the best tools out there, especially when it comes to writing copies and generally anything in general. I've used a tool similar to it for email writing, where it kind of goes in and basically help me rewrite, some of my emails, right? But the reason why we want to implement Copy AI is to help us write some of those, copies that we want to send out to customers, or also for our landing page and stuff like that. And if you test it out or hire a Copy AI, there's other tools out there, but the way I kind of envision us using it is to actually go back to using Zapier and kind of implement it to where whenever we're creating a new ad copy, it will go and basically talk to Copy AI and write those copy for us and send it back to us for us to review, and then say, okay, yeah, we can adjust this, or this is perfect the way it is, and put an ad out there for that. So that's one of the tools that I'm still testing it out myself to really see how useful it is, because one, you don't want AI to kind of tell you, everything that you should be telling your customers, because sometimes you can get it wrong, and sometimes is spot on what you want to say.
Or did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say there are some tools like built on top of Airtable. I think one is called, I can't remember it. It's like a short S word. But there's like more automation inside of Airtable that I'd love to explore. I really like Airtable as a UI and as a place to like interact with data. And I think already it's like a good tool, but I definitely want to dive deeper into like some of the applications and automations that are within that. And then Notion is also one that I use personally as a notebook and like kind of my repository of information. And there's Notion AI now that's within that. So I'm excited to get access to Notion AI, which is like a writing assistant built inside of Notion. And we're always exploring no code tools. Like I love looking at like new Webflow templates and like even UI kits. And I think something to think about if you are an engineer, or if you are a developer, there's like an aspect of low or no code that is paying for code. So you're paying for like a software development kit. You're paying for something like Tailwind UI, which is like a framework of components that you can use out of the box. And we often start our development projects there so that developers can move faster. They already have like pre-built components to work from. And I'm always assessing things like that and really interested in the new ones that come out around there, because I love to look at their design systems and potentially implement them in new tools in the future. So there's always ones that come out on that have Figma files associated with them. So like I'll look at the Figma community and dive into like what are the cool UI that are available to buy and implement into your product immediately.
Yeah, so actually, Melinda, go ahead. Yeah.
No, nothing additional to add. I think I just want to, I think for me, just to see how much more I can automate from our HubSpot. That's primarily the thing. I guess like for Lauren, I'm actually curious what your thoughts are, and we could discuss this offline too. Like my frustration with Notion is that whenever I create a database or whatever in Notion and I want to share it with my team, I send a link out. That link always pulls them to the web app rather than the app that's installed on the computer. And that's super frustrating for me and my team. So yeah, so there's these little nuances with the software that sometimes can be frustrating. Yeah.
I agree. I think I have that same issue with Notion too. And I am a desktop app user. Like I download the desktop app, I like to switch my OS between them and kind of be in the zone. And sometimes ClickUp does that as well. And I don't know if there's like a browser setting, probably something to Google. Like how can we make it open those apps? But it might be a known bug, which is also like a thing you run into with no code is you might run into bugs in the software that you're using and you have to report those bugs. It's important to report them. A lot of times you don't want to because it's extra effort, but reporting bugs helps that software get better. Yeah, we've had to report many a bug across the no-code tools we're using. And sometimes they get fixed and sometimes they're just there for a while.
Yeah, no, Notion's a great example of another, like we didn't cover it early on, but it is definitely a low code, no code tool for those of you who know startup recipes, both, here and in the audience. That is a Notion database and a tool called Super that just converts it into a static site. So, even though I have technically the ability to build something like that, not having to build a website just to get information out there was a huge win. Let me look here. So Jim Jones asking, even if your team has a software dev capability, is low code, no code still the right answer in, what kind of circumstances?
I say absolutely yes. I think that I always like to tell other founders or other people building software that like writing code is like buying a boat. All the cost is in the maintenance and like the ongoing support that you will have to put into that code. Even your no code tools needs those maintenance and support. Like we all know that. But software engineers are incredibly valuable resources. They're hard to find. And then when you do find them, you want them to work on the most important aspects of your product or tool. And I think that employing no code or low code just ensures that you are doing that exactly as early as possible and limiting, even if you have software engineers, limiting the amount of things that they have to work through that is not your core product. Or isn't, they don't have to do it because no code can handle it. And then the maintenance costs are generally lower on no or low code because there's a lot of framework built around that. And then once you graduate out of it, you have, a working thing that is essentially like it's a prototype, and it becomes the prototype for what developers then build, so they can build something that's much more robust and better solved for the solution by having gone through the no code process first.
Yeah, I use software as a free puppy. It's kind of the same thing as the boat, right? Like the puppy's pretty cheap, but now there's shots and food and walking and everything takes time and attention. Cool. So another question that's come up, it came up certainly in the people who are registering is, can you give a sense of like how much these tools cost? I know, Melinda, you talked about, using the free tier of these things and, what are the strengths and weaknesses of that?
I mean, the free tier definitely, you're limited, like Zapier, we're limited to 5 automations. I was frustrated, but then it also like makes you think about like, okay, what is the most important process that I want automated? And perhaps are there some processes that are really not adding much value? And so then we would just like remove it and add another automation. So Zapier is limited in that sense. You only get 5 zaps. And our primary zaps, it's the email thing, and it sends a lot of stuff that gets into our inbox, into our Slack channel. We are most active on Slack. And so having it on Slack just makes it easy for us to get stuff done. And then, yeah, HubSpot is free. The CRM free version on HubSpot is super robust. I would not be paying a single cent for a while for HubSpot, just for my use. We're a startup. We're so always looking for ways to cut costs. I will say we did spend money on ClickUp, and that was one of my regrets, was that we didn't have a good process set up with ClickUp first, and then we went for it, because ClickUp, you have to pay much earlier in the process. And then a free trial. I think the free trial is pretty limited. And so we jumped the gun and bought the subscription to ClickUp. And I know for Lauren's team, it worked really well for her, but I think for our team, it was just way too many functionality, way too early. It was much more overwhelming than it was helpful. And so I do regret purchasing that. And which is why, like, my principle now is like, we will use the free version to its maximum until we really, really have a reason to pay for the premium version. And this sucks for people who are developing the software, but I apologize. That's my answer.
Anyone else got thoughts on, what do you end up spending on these tools, and, do you feel like you're getting the return on investment from them?
Yeah, for me, I think so with Webflow, because one of the things we wanted to create was a CMS database, right? To be able to just go in and create a new, listing onto our platform. And to do that, we needed to upgrade to their, a more premium version, and also to pay for web hosting through them. Everything came in around like maybe $20, a month, right? So instead of right away going to find an engineer, so doing all of those, and having our own hosting plan, for example, with AWS. Now AWS, we're spending around $23 a month, just because we haven't fully launched to the public. You see, we're still in private beta, so still a little cheaper. But with Webflow, we are only paying that for every single thing that we're doing, like the CMS, the web hosting, and had so many of the tools that we need to use on the platform just given to us, right? So it was worth the money. But now that we kind of are shifting towards building everything in the house, we see the cost like is rising every day, right? So it's kind of like, okay, should we have just stay on Webflow and just keep on building to the point where we get to like, oh, okay, now we actually need to build our own platform. But overall, I think some of them are worth the cost, and then there's some that are just like, if you don't have to pay for it, use a free version until you can't no more.
Yeah, we had a lot of the same tools, so similar costs. We were paying for a lot of them because our usage of like HubSpot was high enough, and we wanted to use some more of the like marketing campaign stuff. We moved all of our email over there, and we were able to take advantage of like a HubSpot startup plan, which is like pretty generous when you do get into it. A lot of these tools do have startup plans, so if you Google like Hubflow startup plan, you have to apply to be a part of it, and they like actually look at when your company was formed and everything else. But it ended up being like, after a year of using it, and the plan kind of has like graduated discounts, so you like have a deep discount the first year, and then you have a little bit less of one the second year. And we added more services from HubSpot. Our bill was like $280. We were like, oh my gosh, it's an expensive tool once you do start paying for it. So I think that like when I think about HubSpot, depending on how you're using it, like I feel like we have different companies that are using tools differently, and what worked for us is not necessarily going to work for everyone else. But also think about, once you do have to start paying, what is that potential total cost of a tool once you graduate up? And hopefully you're paying because you have a lot of customers, right? Like you're paying because you're getting good activity in your business. So at that point, the cost of HubSpot wouldn't have felt like as much if we also had like the robust conversions and things on that side that were also helping us like validate the expenditure. So take a look at like what the free plan is and then what the maybe total plan is. And a lot of times you have to pay for seats for people, so it's like a per seat basis, and that can be frustrating if you're working with contractors and other people who come in and out, because you're like, do I have to pay for your seat all the time? There's a lot of things to think about with cost around these things, but generally they're a lot lower cost than trying to do it yourself or hiring someone out to handle it for you.
Any advice for somebody, maybe, maybe a larger organization who's, trying to get started with implementation of these?
Design it first, map it out, use something like Miro or draw.io or Figma to like draw boxes of like where your data is coming in, what you want it to do, and like where it needs to go. Some of those boxes you might have question marks because you actually haven't chosen the tools or the platform for where it's going, but just thinking about where things have to, where the data is coming from and where you want to put it and mapping that out is actually like the first step in getting started. So it's actually like first very manual. And then don't be afraid to do it all manually. Like do things that don't scale in the startup world. This is like one of those opportunities to do something that doesn't scale. You might be manually sending the same email for a while, just test out that process, and that's okay. And it's gonna feel like not great, and you're like, it's just gonna give you more insight into when you then go to automate it, how exactly it needs to be automated, because you've sent it manually, you've gotten the responses back, you're actually reading it in real time, and you're not really missing the edge cases that might pop up.
Any other thoughts on getting started with implementing some of these?
Yeah, definitely map out what you're trying to do and have a clear goal of why you are even going towards the no code or low code solution, because we started out with Figma, right? Designing everything in Figma to figure out exactly how we were going to make the website flow using Webflow. And I've seen enterprise companies also using Webflow. And that was kind of what drew us to even use Webflow as well, because I was looking at their page and they kind of showed, like, oh, look at who is using Webflow. And I saw Dell was using Webflow, and I was like, oh, if they're using it, then us, the smaller guys, can also use it. It's a tool that it's really working for them. And I've seen it, with other organizations that are using it for more different marketing campaigns or like different product that they're building, right? And they just use no-code tools to push those out as quickly as they can. And overall, I think using no-code and low-code tools really works for marketing teams as well, because you're able to put out different marketing campaigns and different product offering even faster versus waiting for your engineering team to go in and then spend at least 1 or 2 sprints building out all these new web pages for you, when you can directly cut costs by just using low code and no code tools.
This is one of those questions that came up from one of the registrants, and it's something like, when we've been in this panel, we've always been saying low code and no code. What's the difference? Like, does it matter? You want to try and kind of separate those out, and is there a reason to use one versus the other?
I guess like for me as a non-coder and who does not have a software company, I think of like no code as something that like literally I just click a button, right? Like on Slack, when you have like Google Meet integration, things like that, it's just one click and it just does it, the whole thing by itself. And then I would say low code for me, would it be something like Zapier, where like you do need some understanding of how like coding things in a logical framework works. So that's my definition. I'm sure people in the programming world would have a much different definition.
My cheeky answer is that it's all code. You're just paying someone else to take care of it for you. Because in reality, that's kind of what you're doing. And so I think it's like, in some ways, Parcel Health is like a software company because you're using like you have software that's behind the things that you're doing, even if it's no code software. You're not custom writing it yourself. And so I think everyone thinking about, just like it is code, it's just that you're paying someone else to manage the intricacies of that code. And I think that often, like, that framework kind of helps think about like when you might need to switch between low code and no code. No code is like, yeah, I think really usable. There is an interface, drag and drop. It has all been created in a graphical user interface for folks. And then low code involves some amount of code. And even Excel, like I said, you're writing code. Anytime you have to write in a language that's not, your native language, and you're writing computer speak, like Excel functions or anything like that, that's code. And so there's lots of places to do that. And a lot of the tools are never purely no code, because there's always the spot where you can put in a custom code snippet or things like that. And so I think, like, for people who are like in the no code world, you can definitely gain a lot more skills just by dabbling a little bit in some code and learning some HTML, CSS, learning a little bit of JavaScript when you need it. And I've had to do that. Like, I'm not paid to ever write JavaScript except for when I have to go copy and paste something from a Webflow like forum post. Like, okay, this is how we do it. So there's not a lot of delineation. I think it's a continuum, a spectrum of no code to low code. But ultimately underneath it is all code.
One more question that's come up from the audience is, we've talked a lot about implementing these, and all of your are early stage companies. Like, are these tools able to scale beyond prototype and start? Like, can you actually build a $20 million business and still kind of have them at the core? Where do you feel like they start to break down?
Ask me in 2 years. I'll have a better answer. That's my answer.
I absolutely think it's possible, depending on the type of business you're building. I do think there's limitations of like, for example, Webflow is really great, but it's hard because of the way they set up accounts. And like, you essentially need any tool, that no code tool, to also provide an API into that functionality, which is like an application programming interface, which is what developers use to interact with systems and tools. And I think if there is an API, a public, an API available to users of that tool, there is an opportunity to scale, because then you can start to interact with that system, on the back end, and maybe it scale it. For like something like Webflow, some of the difficulties are the amount of users that you need to have on the platform, like as a CMS, how performant it is for the editors, the people who are updating blog posts, creating blog posts, versus the developer who's managing the Webflow user who's managing the kind of design and the system. And there's places where it can, when you have a lot of different people across a lot of different websites, it might get more complex. So having more, a content management system that's more built on the backend side in those code, that actually like helps all those different editors be like able to do what they need to do, can be difficult as you scale, as you get bigger. So I think that's where you can run into those issues. But I think it's like an easy thing to design kind of to the next level. So like starting with no code, I don't think is ever gonna be wrong, because it's always gonna be like less complex and less maintenance than actually writing code. And when you get to those areas, hopefully a lot of the no code tools you're using do have an ability to also write code. And that really is what makes it, I think, extensible, is having both, the best of both worlds, or as much of a balance as you can have.
we just got a couple minutes left. So, is there anything else you want to share? Any thoughts? Anything we didn't cover that you think the audience, what is important to know?
I saw some discussion of Canva in the comments.
Yeah.
So I just want to point out that I think that's a great tool, no code tool, and has really changed the game for giving people access to visual platforms that previously were kind of difficult to use or too complex. So like if you're somewhere between drawing on a piece of paper and Figma, or drawing on a whiteboard and Photoshop, like Canva is your tool. Like it's an easy to use visual tool. And I think that like reducing the technical knowledge that anyone needs to start building something that they want to build or creating a visual they want to create is like super positive for everyone. So I love that now I don't have to resize logos and do different things because someone has Canva and they can go in there and just create the asset that's in their mind's eye instead of as the designer. I love Canva.
Yaovi.
Yeah, I echo that. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, love Canva. I use it all the time. Yeah, it's extremely powerful. That's the tool that we do pay money for because of how much we use it. We basically maxed out the free version, and I was like, the premium version is very affordable, allows a lot of people on there to collaborate. My intern can tag me whenever she's done doing something. So that's a tool that we paid for the premium, very affordable, very robust. And I see that they also recently added a bunch of new functionalities where you can do like sharing documents and creating like workflows on it. And we talked about using things like Draw.io or whatever to map out processes. And Canva is starting to have those functionalities. So love it. Yeah.
Oh, and
Thank
the
you,
last thing I
everyone.
was going to say is, sorry.
Go ahead,
No,
Yaovi.
go ahead, Yaovi. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to add, if you're a founder and you're kind of stuck and not knowing, before you consider hiring a contractor or a freelancer to build your website, explore no code and low code tools before you make that decision, because in the long run, you have a better result doing it yourself with a no code or low code tool out there. That's it.
Well, I think that was the perfect wrap-up sentence for this session. So thank you to all of our panelists. Your experiences and the way that you've had to learn about low code, no code is so valuable to be able to share with our audience. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and due to the popular request in the chat, we will make sure to round up all of these resources we have named and send it out to all of the attendees after this conversation as well. I have a feeling we're going to circle back to this topic next year because there's been a lot in the news about even more recent low code, no code applications emerging in the market. But until then, thank you. This was Cafe IW, and we'll see you all in the new year. Stay happy, stay healthy, and have a wonderful December. Thanks.
Thank you.